Move it, coffee girl! Colonel Marcus Webb's voice boomed through the Pentagon hallway as he shoved past the small woman struggling to navigate through the crowd of officers heading toward the briefing room. The coffee tray in her hands tilted dangerously, the white porcelain cups clinking against each other like wind chimes in a storm. "Sorry, sir," Sarah Mitchell whispered, her brown eyes fixed on the polished marble floor. Her Army combat uniform bore the wrinkles of an overnight shift, and her worn boots created a soft scuffing sound against the pristine surface. Nobody would have guessed that this 27-year-old woman, standing barely 5'4" tall, with a voice that barely carried above a whisper, could possibly belong in the most classified war room in America. "Cafeteria's on the second floor, sweetheart," Major Brad Stevens chuckled, straightening his tie and exchanging glances with his colleagues. "This area is for people who actually know how to fight." Rough laughter erupted from the group of officers waiting outside the strategic planning room. They had no idea that when the silver ring hidden beneath Sarah's tactical gloves would be exposed, the entire room would fall silent as a tomb. And the man standing at the end of the hallway, General Morrison, with his silver stars gleaming on his shoulders, would freeze solid when he recognized the symbol he thought had been buried along with classified files 3 years ago. But right now, they were about to make the most catastrophic mistake of their military careers. Sarah adjusted her grip on the coffee tray, her movements precise, despite the visible tremor of exhaustion. She'd arrived at the Pentagon early that morning, alone as always, carrying her worn tactical bag that had seen better decades. While other officers socialized in expensive clusters, she quietly reviewed classified documents in the corner, her brown hair catching the fluorescent light as she concentrated on intelligence reports that would determine the fate of American soldiers overseas. The phone call from her mother the night before still echoed in her mind. "When are you getting that promotion, honey? Your father would be so proud to see his little girl moving up in the world." Sarah's quiet response had been barely audible, even to herself. "Soon. Hopefully, Mom. Soon." But hope felt distant in the sterile hallways of military bureaucracy, where being small, quiet, and female meant being invisible, or worse, being seen as incompetent. Colonel Marcus Webb dominated every room he entered. At 52, his 6'3" frame and booming voice commanded attention, even if his ideas didn't always deserve it. A former infantry officer bitter about his desk assignment, he compensated for his frustration by asserting dominance over anyone he perceived as weak. Women, especially young women like Sarah, represented everything he believed didn't belong in his military. Major Brad Stevens, 38 and charismatic, had graduated from Ranger School with honors. His natural leadership abilities made him popular among junior officers, but his popularity came with a dark side. He enjoyed having an audience for his cruel humor, and Sarah had become his favorite target. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, 31 and technically brilliant, prided himself on his intelligence analysis expertise. He had a particular talent for mansplaining military concepts to female officers, regardless of their actual knowledge or experience. His condescending tone could make even the most accomplished woman feel like a first-year cadet. Staff Sergeant Rick Torres, 29, and resentful of college-educated officers, took particular pleasure in making life difficult for anyone with bars on their shoulders. His jealousy toward commissioned officers manifested in subtle sabotage and deliberate incompetence that was hard to prove but impossible to ignore. As Sarah entered the briefing room with her coffee service, she moved with an economy of motion that spoke of extensive training. Her eyes automatically cataloged the room's exits, the positions of potential cover, and the sight lines from every angle. It was a habit so deeply ingrained that she performed the assessment without conscious thought, the way most people breathed. Her tactical bag, worn and weathered, contained equipment that would have raised eyebrows if anyone had bothered to look. The specialized communication devices featured military-grade smartphone technology with satellite connectivity capabilities that maintained secure data transmission even in the most hostile operational environments. The ruggedized tablet she carried had been designed specifically for battlefield conditions, its reinforced screen capable of withstanding extreme temperatures and impacts that would destroy civilian electronics entirely. "Coffee, sir," Sarah offered quietly as she approached Webb's position near the head of the conference table. Webb knocked over a stack of papers with his elbow, sending classified documents scattering across the floor. "Clean that up," he ordered without looking at her. "Women belong in logistics, not combat planning. Maybe if you spent less time trying to play soldier and more time learning your actual job, we wouldn't have this kind of mess." The other officers laughed as Sarah knelt to gather the scattered papers. None of them noticed the way her eyes tracked the classified information or how she paused for just a fraction of a second when she spotted a critical intelligence leak that could compromise ongoing operations. Her photographic memory cataloged every detail, but she remained silent. "You know what?" Major Stevens announced to the room, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to an audience. "Let's put our coffee girl to work. Mitchell, you're on serving duty for today's briefing. Let the men handle the real military work." Sarah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but she nodded. "Yes, sir." As she served coffee to the assembled officers, she couldn't help but overhear their tactical discussion. They were planning a counterinsurgency operation in a region she knew intimately, and every word they spoke revealed their fundamental misunderstanding of the enemy's capabilities and motivations. When Lieutenant Morrison began explaining the operational parameters with the confident ignorance of someone who had never left American soil, Sarah found herself gripping the coffee pot handle with white knuckles. "The Taliban forces in this sector operate according to predictable patterns," Morrison declared, pointing at satellite imagery on the large display screen. "Standard asymmetric warfare tactics, nothing we haven't seen 1,000 times before." Sarah knew he was wrong. Catastrophically, dangerously wrong. The forces in that region had evolved far beyond standard insurgency tactics, incorporating sophisticated technology and psychological warfare techniques that Morrison's textbook knowledge couldn't account for. "Sir?" she began quietly, approaching Morrison with a fresh cup of coffee. "If I could just mention—" "You could mention that my coffee's getting cold," Stevens interrupted, his voice sharp with annoyance. "Nobody asked for analysis from the help." The room erupted in laughter again, and Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. She retreated to the corner, but her mind continued processing the tactical errors she was witnessing. These men were planning to send soldiers into a situation that would result in casualties, and their arrogance was preventing them from recognizing information that could save lives. Lieutenant Emma Walsh, 24 and fresh from the academy, watched the interaction with growing discomfort. Unlike her male colleagues, she had noticed Sarah's precise movements and the way the older woman seemed to absorb information with startling efficiency. There was something about Sarah Mitchell that didn't add up, something that suggested capabilities far beyond what her current assignment would indicate. "Collins, bring up the satellite feeds from Sector 7, Webb ordered, settling into his chair like a king holding court. "Let's see what our intelligence assets have been up to." The feeds showed real-time imagery of mountainous terrain dotted with small settlements. Webb leaned forward, studying the landscape with the intensity of someone trying to appear knowledgeable. Sarah, refilling water glasses along the back wall, found herself holding her breath as she recognized landmarks that brought back memories she had tried to bury. "Standard mountain warfare scenario," Stevens declared with characteristic confidence. "We go in fast, establish a perimeter, neutralize hostile forces, and extract, clean and simple." Sarah's hand trembled almost imperceptibly as she set down the water pitcher. Clean and simple. If only they knew how many soldiers had died believing in clean and simple operations in terrain that forgave no mistakes and gave no second chances. During the brief recess, Sarah found herself alone with Lieutenant Walsh near the coffee station. The younger officer approached hesitantly, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "Excuse me, Mitchell," Emma said quietly. "I noticed you seemed concerned about something during the briefing." Sarah studied the young woman's face, seeing genuine curiosity rather than mockery. "Just focused on doing my job, ma'am." "That's not what I mean." Emma lowered her voice further. "When Morrison was talking about operational parameters, you looked like you knew something he didn't. Your expression changed completely." For a moment, Sarah considered responding honestly. The urge to share her knowledge to prevent the tactical disaster she could see approaching warred with years of conditioning that had taught her the value of silence. "I'm sure the lieutenant knows what he's talking about, ma'am," Sarah replied carefully. "I'm just here to serve coffee." But Emma wasn't convinced. She had spent enough time in military environments to recognize the difference between ignorance and enforced silence. Sarah Mitchell was hiding something significant, and Emma's instincts told her it might be something important. The briefing resumed with Webb calling for an emergency simulation to test their tactical approach. "We need to see how our strategy holds up under realistic conditions," he announced. "This operation launches in 72 hours, and I want no surprises." "Mitchell!" Stevens called out, his voice carrying across the room. "You're on observer status. Stand in the corner and try not to break anything." Sarah took her assigned position along the wall, but her eyes remained focused on the simulation displays. The scenario unfolded exactly as she had feared. The simulated enemy forces adapted quickly to conventional tactics, using terrain advantages and unconventional strategies that the planners hadn't anticipated. Within minutes, the simulation showed American casualties mounting. The officers at the command table began arguing among themselves, their confidence evaporating as their carefully laid plans crumbled under digital fire. "This isn't possible," Morrison protested, his face flushed with frustration. "The enemy doesn't have access to this kind of technology." Sarah watched in silence as the simulation spiraled toward total failure. Her fingers drummed against her thigh in a precise rhythm. Not nervous energy, but tactical timing, muscle memory from operations where seconds meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Webb slammed his hand on the table. "Reset the simulation. There must be an error in the programming." "Sir," Sarah said quietly from her position against the wall. "Permission to suggest an alternative approach." The room fell silent, 20 pairs of eyes turning toward her with expressions ranging from surprise to outright hostility. "Did the coffee girl just try to give us tactical advice?" Stevens asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Sit down," Webb roared, his face turning red. "This isn't time for amateur theories from someone whose biggest decision is regular or decaf." But Sarah remained standing, her brown eyes steady and calm. "Sir, the simulation is failing because the enemy profile is based on outdated intelligence. The insurgent forces in that region have evolved beyond conventional asymmetric warfare." "And how exactly would you know that?" Morrison demanded, rising from his chair. Sarah's response was quiet but clear. "Because I've been there, sir, and I've seen what they can do." The admission hung in the air like smoke from a discharged weapon. Webb's expression shifted from anger to confusion, while Stevens exchanged uncertain glances with his colleagues. "Been where exactly?" Webb asked, his voice lower but no less dangerous. Sarah hesitated for just a moment. 3 years of careful anonymity warred with the knowledge that good soldiers were about to die because of tactical ignorance and masculine pride. "Afghanistan, sir. The same region you're planning to deploy to." "As what?" Stevens pressed. Support staff? Medical corps? Operations, Sarah replied simply. The word fell into the silence like a stone into still water, creating ripples of uncertainty throughout the room. Operations meant combat. Operations meant classified missions. Operations meant Sarah Mitchell might be something other than what she appeared. Morrison laughed, but it sounded forced. Right. And I suppose you single-handedly won the war over there. Sarah's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. A straightening of her spine, a subtle adjustment of her stance that transformed her from a submissive coffee server into something else entirely. No, sir, she said quietly. But I did learn how to recognize when American soldiers are about to walk into a trap. During the intensity of the tactical discussion, Sarah had relied on her comprehensive trauma management training, originally developed for elite special operations personnel. The advanced stress management techniques and specialized psychological protocols she'd learned enabled her to maintain perfect emotional control, even while facing the career-ending consequences of revealing her true background in this high-pressure military environment. The evidence-based trauma management methods had taught her to compartmentalize operational memories while accessing tactical knowledge when lives depended on her expertise. The simulation continued to unfold on the main display, showing American forces pinned down in a mountain pass with no clear extraction route, casualties mounted with each passing minute of simulated time, and the officers around the conference table grew increasingly agitated. There has to be a way to salvage this, Webb muttered, studying the tactical display with growing desperation. Maybe if we adjust the approach vector, Stevens suggested, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. Sarah watched the digital carnage unfold, seeing patterns that the trained officers missed. The enemy AI wasn't just following random programming. It was implementing sophisticated tactics that mirrored real-world insurgent strategies she had encountered in operations that didn't officially exist. Sir, she said again, her voice cutting through the heated discussions around the table. What now? Webb snapped. The enemy forces are using the terrain to create overlapping fields of fire. Standard assault tactics won't work because they've turned the entire valley into a kill zone. Morrison scoffed. And I suppose you have a better idea. Sarah stepped closer to the tactical display, her movements precise and controlled. Yes, sir, I do. She pointed to a series of ridge lines on the topographical map. These positions provide visual command of the valley floor, but they're vulnerable to flanking maneuvers if you approach from the northeast. The terrain analysis shows a series of ravines that aren't visible in the satellite imagery. They provide concealed approach routes that bypass the primary defensive positions. The room fell silent as the officers studied the map. Sarah's analysis was detailed, specific, and demonstrated a level of tactical understanding that went far beyond what any support personnel should possess. How do you know about these ravines? Emma asked quietly. Sarah met her eyes for a moment. Personal reconnaissance, ma'am. When? Webb demanded. That's classified, sir. The simple response sent a chill through the room. Classified meant black ops. Classified meant missions that didn't appear in official records. Classified meant Sarah Mitchell had just revealed herself as something far more dangerous than a coffee-serving support officer. Implement her suggestions, Webb ordered reluctantly. Let's see if our coffee expert knows what she's talking about. The simulation reset with the new tactical parameters. Instead of a frontal assault into prepared defensive positions, the simulated American forces approached from multiple angles, using terrain features to avoid detection and neutralize enemy positions systematically. The results were immediate and dramatic. Enemy casualties mounted, while American losses dropped to minimal levels. The mission transformed from a catastrophic failure to a tactical victory, all because someone had recognized the true nature of the threat they were facing. Holy cow! Morrison whispered, staring at the simulation results. Stevens leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Mitchell, what exactly was your MOS in Afghanistan? Military occupational specialty, the question that would determine whether Sarah could maintain her carefully constructed anonymity or whether 3 years of hiding would come to an end in a Pentagon briefing room. Operations specialist, sir, she replied carefully. That's not specific enough, Webb pressed. What kind of operations? Sarah's silence stretched long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. The kind that don't exist in official records, sir. Emma Walsh felt her pulse quicken. She was witnessing something unprecedented. A support officer demonstrating tactical knowledge that exceeded that of trained combat leaders. The implications were staggering. Ma'am, Emma said carefully, would you be willing to advise on the full operational plan? Before Sarah could answer, Webb interjected. She's not qualified to advise on anything. Coffee service is her job description, and coffee service is what she'll stick to. But the damage was already done. Word would spread through the Pentagon's informal networks. Questions would be asked. And sooner or later, someone with the right clearance level would start looking into the background of Captain Sarah Mitchell and discover information that had been buried for very good reasons. Sarah returned to her position along the wall, but the atmosphere in the room had changed. The easy dismissal and casual mockery had been replaced by uncertainty and speculation. She had revealed just enough to save lives, while hopefully not revealing enough to destroy the new identity she had spent 3 years building. The briefing continued, but Sarah noticed the way conversations quieted when she approached with coffee refills, the way officers glanced at her when they thought she wasn't looking, the way Lieutenant Walsh kept finding excuses to position herself within earshot of Sarah's movements. Her tactical bag suddenly felt heavier, weighted down not just with the equipment inside, but with the knowledge that her carefully maintained anonymity was beginning to crumble. The specialized communication devices and ruggedized tablet she relied on for staying connected to the world she had officially left behind might soon become evidence in an investigation she couldn't afford. When the lunch break was announced, Sarah found herself alone in the corridor outside the briefing room. Most of the officers had headed to the cafeteria, but she remained behind to clean up the conference room and reset the coffee service for the afternoon session. Mitchell. Emma's voice was quiet, but insistent. Sarah turned to find the young lieutenant standing in the doorway, her expression serious. Yes, ma'am. I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Sarah's defensive walls went up immediately. Ma'am, are you who you say you are? The question hung between them like a loaded weapon. Sarah could deflect it, could maintain her cover story, could continue the charade that had protected her for 3 years. Or she could trust this young officer who had shown her more respect in one morning than most people had in months. That's a complicated question, ma'am, Sarah replied finally. I'm willing to listen to a complicated answer. Sarah studied Emma's face, looking for signs of hidden agendas or personal motivations. She found only genuine curiosity and what appeared to be professional respect. Some of us serve in ways that don't fit neatly into official categories, Sarah said carefully. Some service requires sacrifices that go beyond what most people understand. What kind of sacrifices? The kind where you give up everything, including your own identity, to protect people who will never know your name or understand what you've done for them. Emma was quiet for a long moment. That sounds lonely. It is, Sarah admitted, but it's also necessary. Before Emma could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Webb and Stevens were returning from lunch, their conversation loud and boisterous. Back to work, ladies, Stevens called out as he entered the briefing room. The afternoon session starts in 5 minutes, and I want fresh coffee ready. Sarah nodded and moved toward the coffee station, but she could feel Emma's eyes following her movements. The young lieutenant had questions that wouldn't be easily dismissed, and Sarah suspected that their conversation was far from over. The afternoon briefing focused on detailed mission planning, with officers debating logistics, equipment requirements, and personnel assignments. Sarah served coffee and took notes on routine administrative matters, but her trained ear caught every detail of the operational discussion. She noticed gaps in their intelligence gathering that could prove fatal. She recognized equipment choices that were inappropriate for the terrain and climate they would encounter. Most importantly, she understood enemy capabilities and motivations that the intelligence briefings had failed to capture. But speaking up again would draw more attention than she could afford. The morning's revelation had already put her at risk of discovery, and any additional demonstration of knowledge would only increase suspicion about her true background. As the hours passed, Sarah watched trained military professionals make decisions that would result in unnecessary casualties. Her silence felt like complicity, but breaking cover completely would end her ability to serve in any capacity. The internal conflict was tearing her apart. Every instinct developed through years of combat operations screamed at her to intervene, to share the information that could save lives. But the pragmatic part of her mind, the part that had kept her alive through impossible situations, counseled patience and discretion. The briefing was interrupted by a priority communication from field commanders requesting immediate tactical support. An American patrol had encountered unexpected resistance in a sector that intelligence reports had classified as secure. "Casualties?" Webb asked tersely. "3 wounded, sir. They're requesting immediate extraction and medical support." Sarah's hands stilled on the coffee pot. 3 soldiers bleeding in terrain she knew intimately, their lives hanging in the balance, while officers who had never heard enemy fire debated response options. "Standard extraction protocols should handle this," Morrison declared confidently. "No," Sarah said quietly. Every head in the room turned toward her. "Excuse me?" Webb's voice carried a dangerous edge. Sarah set down the coffee pot and faced the room full of officers. "Standard extraction protocols won't work in that terrain, sir. Not against the enemy forces operating in that sector." "And how exactly would you know that?" Stevens demanded. Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would change everything. "Because I've extracted wounded soldiers from that exact location before, sir, under enemy fire in weather conditions that grounded all air support." The silence that followed was absolute. 20 trained military professionals stared at a woman they had dismissed as support staff, trying to reconcile her quiet competence with claims that suggested combat experience at the highest levels. "When?" Webb asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 18 months ago, Sarah replied steadily. "Operation Ghost Echo, classified under Special Access Protocols." Morrison's face had gone pale. Ghost Echo was a Delta Force operation. Sarah met his eyes without flinching. "Yes, sir, it was." The implications crashed through the room like a tidal wave. Delta Force was the military's most elite special operations unit, comprised of soldiers who represented the absolute pinnacle of military capability. The suggestion that their coffee server might be connected to such operations was beyond anything they had imagined. But before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Emergency protocols activated as the Pentagon shifted into crisis mode, and suddenly, the question of Sarah Mitchell's background became secondary to the immediate threat facing American forces overseas. The comfortable world of briefing rooms and coffee service was about to give way to the harsh reality of military operations, where seconds mattered and mistakes cost lives. And in that environment, Sarah Mitchell's true capabilities were about to become impossible to hide. The emergency klaxons pierced through the briefing room like razor blades through silk. Red lights bathed the Pentagon corridor in an ominous glow as automated voices announced a security breach in Sector 7. the exact location where American soldiers were currently pinned down under enemy fire. "All personnel to emergency stations." The announcement echoed through the building. "This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Webb grabbed the secure phone, his earlier arrogance replaced by grim focus. "Command, this is Colonel Webb. What's our situation?" The response crackled through the speakers, filled with static and tension. "Sir, we have a catastrophic failure in the field operation. Enemy forces have jammed all communications with the patrol, and satellite imagery shows significant hostile movement converging on their position." Sarah's hands moved instinctively to her tactical bag, checking equipment she hadn't touched in months. Her muscle memory responded to the crisis with frightening efficiency, years of training overriding conscious thought. "Options?" Webb demanded. "Limited, sir. Weather conditions have grounded air support, and ground reinforcements are 6 hours out. The patrol team is effectively cut off." Morrison leaned over the communication console, his face pale with strain. "Can we re-establish contact through alternative channels?" "Negative. All standard communication protocols have been compromised." Sarah stepped forward, her movement fluid and decisive. "Sir, I can reach them." Webb spun around, his expression incredulous. "What?" "I can establish communication with the patrol using non-standard frequencies," Sarah said quietly. "Channels that aren't monitored by conventional enemy surveillance." "How the blazes would you know about non-standard frequencies?" Stevens demanded. Sarah's response was interrupted by another urgent transmission. "Command, be advised. We're picking up signs of an imminent large-scale attack on the patrol position. If we don't extract them within the next 30 minutes, they won't survive the night." The room fell silent, except for the persistent wail of emergency alarms. 3 American soldiers were about to die in a foreign desert while their commanders debated protocol and procedure. "Sir," Sarah said, her voice cutting through the tension with surgical precision, "I need access to the secure communication array and authorization to implement emergency extraction protocols." Webb's laugh was harsh and disbelieving. "You need authorization, lady? You serve coffee. You don't extract soldiers from combat zones." "Actually, sir," Sarah replied with deadly calm, "I do." She moved to the communications console with the fluid efficiency of someone who had performed similar actions under fire. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing systems that required clearance levels far beyond what a support officer should possess. "Mitchell, step away from that console," Morrison shouted. "You're not authorized to—" His words died as Sarah's security credentials appeared on the screen. Instead of the basic clearance expected for support personnel, the display showed classification levels that made several officers in the room take involuntary steps backward. "Holy cow," Emma whispered. "Those are special access program credentials." Sarah ignored the gasps and muttered conversations around her, focusing entirely on establishing contact with the stranded patrol. Her training took over completely, and the quiet coffee server disappeared, replaced by a consummate professional operating in her natural environment. "Viper 7, this is Phantom Base. Do you copy?" Static filled the speakers for several seconds before a desperate voice crackled through the interference. "Phantom Base, this is Viper 7. We thought you were offline. We're taking heavy fire and need immediate extraction." "Copy that, Viper 7. I'm sending you alternate exfiltration routes based on current enemy positions. Stand by for data transmission." Sarah's hands moved across multiple keyboards simultaneously, calling up satellite feeds, terrain analysis, and real-time intelligence data. Her movements were those of someone who had done this countless times before, under conditions where mistakes measured themselves in body bags. "Viper 7. I'm uploading route coordinates to your GPS system now. You'll need to move in 45 seconds when enemy patrols shift positions." "Understood, Phantom Base. Who am I talking to?" You're not our usual handler. Sarah hesitated for just a moment. Someone who's been where you are, Viper 7. Trust the coordinates and move fast. As the extraction unfolded on their screens, the officers in the briefing room watched in stunned silence. Sarah Mitchell, the woman they had dismissed, mocked, and relegated to coffee service, was single-handedly coordinating a complex military operation with the expertise of a seasoned combat veteran. Phantom Base, we're taking fire from multiple positions. The route you sent us is blocked. Sarah's fingers flew across the console, pulling up additional intelligence feeds. Viper 7, adjust course 15 degrees northeast. There's a concealed ravine that will provide cover for the next 200 meters. How do you know about concealed ravines? The voice crackled back. Because I've used them before, Sarah replied simply. Webb moved closer to the console, his expression shifting from anger to amazement. Mitchell, how are you accessing these systems? These require Delta-level clearance codes. Because I have Delta-level clearance codes, sir. The admission hit the room like a physical blow. Delta Force clearance was restricted to fewer than 300 people in the entire military. The suggestion that their coffee server possessed such credentials was beyond comprehension. That's impossible, Stevens said, but his voice lacked conviction. Viper 7, you have a clear path for the next 90 seconds. Move now and maintain radio silence until you reach checkpoint Alpha. Copy that, Phantom Base. Moving now. The tension in the room was suffocating as they watched the GPS indicators representing the patrol team move across the tactical display. Sarah continued providing real-time guidance, her voice calm and professional, despite the life-and-death nature of the situation. Phantom Base, we're at checkpoint Alpha, clear of immediate danger. A collective sigh of relief went up from the assembled officers, but Sarah remained focused on her console. Roger. Viper 7. Extraction birds are inbound to your position. ETA 12 minutes. Hold position and maintain concealment. Understood, Phantom Base. I don't know who you are, but you just saved 3 lives. Thank you. Sarah finally leaned back from the console, her hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline crash. You're welcome, Viper 7. Stay safe out there. The communications ended, leaving the briefing room in profound silence. 20 military professionals stared at a woman who had just demonstrated capabilities that challenged everything they thought they knew about military operations. Mitchell, Webb said quietly, I think we need to have a conversation. Before Sarah could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Heavy, measured steps that spoke of authority and purpose. The briefing room door opened to reveal a figure that made several officers automatically come to attention. General Morrison entered the room like a force of nature. At 61, his presence commanded respect from colonels and privates alike. His chest adorned with decorations from 3 decades of military service, including campaigns that remained classified long after the shooting had stopped. At ease, he said automatically, then stopped short as his eyes found Sarah standing at the communications console. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally something that might have been awe. Gentlemen, Morrison said slowly, never taking his eyes off Sarah. I need to speak with Captain Mitchell alone. Sir, Webb protested. With respect, Captain Mitchell is just... Captain Mitchell, Morrison interrupted, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, is exactly who I came here to see. The other officers began filing out of the room, their movements reluctant and confused. Emma Walsh paused at the door, looking back at Sarah with an expression of profound curiosity. But Morrison's steady gaze convinced her to leave with the others. When the room was empty, except for Sarah and Morrison, the general approached the communications console where she still stood. Hello, Sarah, he said quietly. Hello, General, she replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions she was undoubtedly feeling. Morrison studied her face for a long moment. 3 years. We thought you were dead. That was the intention, sir. The funeral was beautiful, full military honors. I heard you gave the eulogy yourself. Morrison's laugh was short and sharp. I said you were the finest soldier I'd ever commanded. I said you had given everything for your country, including your life. I wasn't lying about the first part. And now, Morrison continued, I'm looking at a ghost who just saved 3 soldiers using skills that officially don't exist. His eyes dropped to Sarah's hands, still resting on the keyboard. May I? Sarah knew what he was asking for. Slowly, she removed her tactical gloves, revealing hands that bore the scars of combat and years of weapons handling. On her right ring finger was a simple silver band bearing an inscription that made Morrison's breath catch. Unit 7, he whispered, reading the inscription. Ghost Protocol. Yes, sir. Morrison reached out and gently took her right hand in both of his own, studying the ring with the reverence of someone examining a religious artifact. We searched for survivors for 6 months, he said quietly. The blast site. There was nothing left, nothing that suggested anyone could have survived. I almost didn't, Sarah replied. It took me 8 months in various hospitals to remember my own name. By the time I was functional again, the unit had been officially disbanded and the record sealed. So you disappeared. I built a new identity. Sarah Mitchell, Army Intelligence Analyst. Quiet, competent, forgettable. It seemed like a good way to continue serving without drawing attention to capabilities that officially don't exist. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, still holding her hand and studying the ring. Do you know what this represents? He asked finally. Sir, this ring identifies you as one of 12 soldiers who completed the most classified training program in American military history. Operations so sensitive that most generals don't have clearance to know they exist. Missions that prevented wars, eliminated threats, and saved thousands of lives. Morrison released her hand and stepped back, his expression shifting from personal recognition to professional assessment. Captain Mitchell, he said formally, by the authority vested in me by the Department of Defense, I am reinstating you to your previous classification level, effective immediately. Sir, I don't think... You don't get a choice in this, Captain. The skills you just demonstrated, the knowledge you possess, the training you've received, these are strategic assets that belong to the American people. You've been hiding in plain sight for 3 years, and that ends now. Sarah felt the weight of her carefully constructed anonymity crumbling around her. General, my current assignment allows me to contribute without drawing attention. I can serve more effectively if... Morrison interrupted. In the past hour, you've demonstrated tactical knowledge that exceeds that of field-grade officers with decades of experience. You've coordinated a successful extraction operation using classified protocols that most colonels don't know exist. You've identified strategic weaknesses in operational planning that could have resulted in massive casualties. He paused, studying her face intently. Most importantly, you've done all of this while being treated with contempt and disrespect by officers who should have been learning from you instead of mocking you. Before Sarah could respond, Morrison moved to the briefing room door and opened it. Gentlemen, please return to the conference room. Webb, Stevens, Morrison, Torres, and the other officers filed back into the room, their expressions ranging from curiosity to apprehension. They arranged themselves around the conference table, but their attention remained focused on Sarah and General Morrison. Gentlemen, Morrison began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. I want to introduce you to Captain Sarah Mitchell, also known as Operator 7, Ghost Protocol, Delta Force, Special Operations. The silence that followed was deafening. Stevens's mouth fell open, Morrison's face drained of color. Webb sat down heavily in his chair, as if his legs could no longer support his weight. For the past 3 years, Morrison continued, Captain Mitchell has been serving in an unofficial capacity while recovering from injuries sustained during a classified operation that saved the lives of 43 American service members and prevented a terrorist attack that could have killed thousands of civilians. Emma Walsh, who had been standing near the back of the room, stepped forward. Sir, are you saying that Captain Mitchell is? I'm saying that Captain Mitchell is the most decorated soldier currently serving in the United States Army, despite the fact that most of her decorations remain classified and will never appear in public records. Morrison reached into his jacket and withdrew a small leather folder. Captain Mitchell, these are your official orders. You are hereby assigned as Senior Tactical Advisor to the Joint Chiefs of Staff with immediate effect. Your clearance level is restored to its previous classification, and you will have direct access to all operational planning at the strategic level. Sarah stared at the folder without taking it. Sir, I appreciate the gesture, but this isn't a gesture, Captain. This is recognition of capabilities that have been wasted for 3 years while you served coffee to officers who couldn't find their way out of a paper bag without GPS coordinates. Webb found his voice first, though it came out as barely more than a croak. Sir, we didn't know. If we had known who she was, Morrison said sharply, you would have treated her with the respect that every soldier deserves, regardless of their background or classification level. The fact that you needed to know her credentials to treat her like a human being says more about your character than hers. Stevens raised a trembling hand. General, I owe Captain Mitchell an apology. Several apologies. You owe her more than apologies, Major. You owe her a complete reevaluation of how you treat subordinates and colleagues. All of you do. Morrison turned his attention back to Sarah. Captain, your first assignment in your new position will be to review and revise the tactical planning for Operation Mountain Storm. Based on what I've observed today, I suspect you'll find numerous deficiencies that need immediate attention. Sarah finally reached out and took the leather folder containing her new orders. Yes, sir. When do you need the analysis completed? Yesterday would be preferable. Tomorrow morning will be acceptable. As Sarah reviewed her orders, the aftermath of her revelation continued to ripple through the room. The communications systems specialist mentioned that her non-standard frequency techniques had been recorded and would be distributed to field units within 24 hours. The intelligence analyst wanted to understand how she had accessed enemy movement patterns that weren't available through conventional sources. The operations coordinator requested her input on 3 other ongoing missions where tactical planning had stalled. Morrison watched the interactions with satisfaction. Gentlemen, I suggest you pay close attention to Captain Mitchell's recommendations. In my experience, her tactical advice has a tendency to save lives and complete missions that would otherwise fail. Over the following weeks, the transformation in the Pentagon's Strategic Planning Division was remarkable. Sarah's presence shifted the entire dynamic of tactical discussions, bringing real-world experience to theoretical planning sessions. Her quiet competence earned the respect of officers who had initially dismissed her, while her ability to identify and solve complex operational problems made her an invaluable asset to mission planning. Webb requested a transfer to a training command, where his leadership style might be more appropriate for managing new recruits rather than experienced professionals. Stevens underwent sensitivity training and emerged as one of Sarah's most dedicated supporters, often citing her tactical innovations in his own presentations. Morrison began seeking opportunities to apply for advanced training programs, recognizing that his technical knowledge needed updating in light of Sarah's demonstrated expertise. Emma Walsh was accepted into the Special Forces Officer Program, with Sarah serving as her mentor and advocate. The younger woman's career trajectory changed completely. Inspired by seeing what was possible when competence was recognized and nurtured rather than dismissed, The policy changes implemented throughout the Pentagon were swift and comprehensive. A new directive established clear protocols for recognizing and utilizing expertise, regardless of an individual's official assignment or background. Training programs were developed to address unconscious bias in military leadership, with particular attention to gender-based assumptions about capability and competence. Sarah's tactical innovations were adopted across multiple branches of the military, improving operational effectiveness and reducing casualties in combat zones around the world. Her communication protocols became standard training for special operations units, while her analytical methods were incorporated into intelligence-gathering procedures. But perhaps most importantly, her story became a powerful example of the talent and capability that could be overlooked when appearances were valued over performance. The woman who had been dismissed as a coffee server became a symbol of hidden strength and unrecognized potential. 6 months after her reinstatement, Sarah stood in the same Pentagon briefing room where her journey had begun. But now she occupied the position at the head of the conference table, leading tactical planning sessions with the confidence of someone whose expertise was acknowledged and respected. The officers who had once mocked her now sought her guidance on complex operational challenges. The same communication console where she had been forbidden to work now responded to her commands with the efficiency of a finely tuned instrument. The tactical displays that had once been off-limits to her now showed her analyses and recommendations to senior military leadership around the world. "Captain Mitchell," Morrison said, as he entered the briefing room for their weekly strategic review, "I have your performance evaluation for your first 6 months in your current position." Sarah looked up from the intelligence reports she was reviewing. "I assume it's positive, sir, or we wouldn't be having this conversation in a public setting." Morrison smiled. "Outstanding in all categories: tactical innovation, operational planning, strategic analysis, leadership development. You've exceeded expectations in every measurable area." "Thank you, sir." "There's something else," Morrison continued, producing a sealed envelope from his jacket. "You've been selected for promotion to major, effective immediately. The promotion ceremony will be held next week with full honors." Sarah stared at the envelope. After 3 years of invisibility and anonymity, the recognition felt almost surreal. "There's more," Morrison said. "You've also been offered a position as Director of Tactical Innovation for the entire Department of Defense. It's a newly created position designed specifically around your unique qualifications and experience." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "That's quite an honor, sir. It's an opportunity to influence military operations at the strategic level, to ensure that the insights and innovations you've developed are implemented across all branches of the armed forces." "I appreciate the confidence, General. When do you need an answer?" "Take whatever time you need, Major. This is a decision that will affect the rest of your career and potentially the effectiveness of American military operations for decades to come." That evening, Sarah sat alone in her apartment, studying the promotion documents and job offer that represented everything she had worked toward throughout her military career. The recognition was gratifying, the opportunity unprecedented, and the potential impact enormous. But as she considered her options, her phone rang. The number displayed was unfamiliar, but the encryption protocols indicated a level of security that made her pulse quicken. "Mitchell," she answered cautiously. "Phantom," a voice said quietly. "We need to talk." Sarah felt her blood turn cold. Only 3 people in the world knew that call sign, and 2 of them were supposed to be dead. "Who is this?" "Someone who's been watching your recent career developments with great interest. Someone who needs your help with a problem that officially doesn't exist." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the peaceful life she had built beginning to slip away. What kind of problem? The kind that involves old enemies, unfinished business, and capabilities that the world isn't ready to know about. the kind that requires someone with your particular combination of skills and clearance levels. The line went quiet for a moment. Then the voice continued. There's a car waiting outside your building. The driver has your old gear and new orders. If you get in that car, your promotion ceremony gets postponed indefinitely, and your new position at the Pentagon becomes a cover story for work that will never appear in any official record. Sarah moved to her window and looked down at the street. A black sedan sat at the curb, its engine running, exhaust visible in the cool evening air. And if I don't get in the car? Then you enjoy your promotion, accept your new position, and spend the rest of your career wondering what would have happened if you had chosen service over safety one more time. Sarah stared at the sedan for a long moment, thinking about the comfortable life she could have. Regular hours, predictable challenges, recognition, and respect from colleagues who understood her value. Everything she had worked toward and deserved. But she also thought about the voice on the other end of the line and the implications of someone from her old unit being alive when the official record said otherwise, about problems that officially didn't exist, but that could affect national security in ways the public would never understand. How long do I have to decide? The car leaves in 5 minutes, with or without you. Sarah looked around her apartment at the life she had built from nothing. The books on tactical analysis, the commendations framed on the wall, the photograph of her with Morrison at the Pentagon ceremony where her reinstatement had been announced. Everything that represented her successful transition from shadow operations to legitimate military service. Then she looked down at the silver ring on her right hand, with its simple inscription that carried the weight of oaths and obligations that transcended official assignments and career advancement. She picked up her tactical bag, the same worn equipment carrier that had accompanied her through 3 years of anonymity and 6 months of recognition. Inside were the tools and devices that connected her to a world where problems were solved without fanfare and victories were measured in threats that never materialized. 2 minutes, the voice said quietly. Sarah Mitchell, newly promoted Major Sarah Mitchell, Director-Designate of Tactical Innovation for the Department of Defense, looked once more around her apartment. Then she turned off the lights, locked the door, and walked downstairs to meet whatever waited in the darkness beyond. The sedan's passenger door opened as she approached, revealing an interior that smelled of leather and secrets. She paused for just a moment, balanced between the life she had built and the calling that had never truly released its hold on her. "Some ghosts never rest," she said quietly, echoing Morrison's words from 6 months earlier. "No," replied the voice from the back seat as she settled into the vehicle. "They don't, but sometimes that's what the world needs most." The sedan pulled away from the curb and disappeared into the Washington night, carrying Major Sarah Mitchell toward a destiny that would never be recorded in official histories, but might well determine the course of events that would shape the future of nations. Behind them, the Pentagon's lights continued to burn as the night shift prepared for challenges they would never fully understand, protected by guardians they would never know existed. The sedan moved through Washington's empty streets with the fluid precision of a vehicle that knew exactly where it was going. Sarah sat in silence, watching familiar landmarks disappear into the darkness behind them. The Pentagon, the Capitol building, the monuments that represented everything she had sworn to protect, all growing smaller in the rear window as she moved toward an uncertain future. "You're wondering if you made the right choice," the voice from the shadows said quietly. Sarah didn't turn around. "I'm wondering why someone who's supposed to be dead is offering me a ride." A soft chuckle came from the darkness. "Death is often a matter of perspective, Phantom. Official records don't always reflect operational realities. Ghost Protocol was disbanded 3 years ago. All personnel were declared KIA or transferred to conventional units. That was the deal. The program was disbanded," the voice agreed. "But the need for what we do never disappeared. It just became more urgent and more sensitive. Sarah finally turned to look at the figure in the back seat, but the interior lighting had been disabled, leaving only shadows and suggestions of a presence she couldn't quite identify. "Who are we going to see?" she asked. "Someone who never existed in the first place. Someone who's been building something new from the pieces of something that was never supposed to survive." The sedan turned onto a highway heading west, away from the city and toward rural areas where secrets could be kept more easily. Sarah recognized the route. It led to facilities that didn't appear on any official maps, installations where work was conducted that would never see congressional oversight or public scrutiny. "The soldiers you saved today," the voice continued, "Viper 7 Patrol. They were part of something larger, something that connects to operations we've been tracking for months." "What kind of operations?" "The kind that suggests someone with access to Ghost Protocol methodologies has been training enemy forces. Someone who knows our capabilities, our procedures, our weaknesses." Sarah felt ice forming in her stomach. "That's impossible. There were only 12 of us, and officially, 11 are dead, and one has been serving coffee in the Pentagon for 3 years. But intelligence suggests otherwise. Someone with our training has been active in multiple theaters, and their signature is unmistakable." "Evidence?" Sarah asked. A tablet appeared from the shadows, its screen showing classified intelligence reports and tactical analyses. Sarah recognized the methodology immediately. It was Ghost Protocol standard, but applied in service of enemy objectives. "How long has this been going on?" "We started noticing patterns 18 months ago. Operations failing in ways that suggested enemy forces had advanced knowledge of American tactics. Intelligence leaks that seemed to come from sources with access to information that shouldn't exist." Sarah studied the intelligence reports, her mind automatically processing the tactical implications. "This isn't just someone sharing information. This is active participation in enemy operations." "Exactly. And it's escalating. The patrol you saved today was specifically targeted because someone knew their route, their capabilities, and their communication protocols." The sedan turned off the highway onto a dirt road that wound through dense forest. Sarah could see lights ahead, suggesting a facility hidden among the trees. "What do you need from me?" "Your unique combination of official status and unofficial capabilities. You're the only person who can move between the legitimate military structure and the shadow world where this problem needs to be solved. And your promotion, your new position, will provide perfect cover for the kind of deep access investigation this situation requires. Major Sarah Mitchell, Director of Tactical Innovation, will have legitimate reasons to review operational failures and analyze enemy capabilities." The sedan stopped in front of a compound that looked like a private retreat, but felt like a military installation. Security was present but subtle. The kind of protection that suggested important work was being conducted inside. "Welcome back to the world that officially doesn't exist," the voice said, as Sarah stepped out of the sedan. The building's interior was a fusion of high-tech command center and comfortable meeting space. Multiple screens displayed real-time intelligence from around the world, while comfortable seating areas suggested this was a place where complex decisions were made over long periods of time. "Sarah Mitchell," a familiar voice called from across the room. "It's been a long time." Sarah turned to see Colonel Patricia Hawkins approaching, her uniform bearing decorations that Sarah remembered from operations that had never been acknowledged publicly. Behind her were 2 other figures Sarah recognized, soldiers she had worked with in situations where failure meant more than career disappointment. "Patricia," Sarah said quietly, "I thought you were dead, transferred, retired." Patricia smiled grimly. "All convenient fictions that allow us to continue work that became more necessary after Ghost Protocol was officially disbanded." "How many others?" "Enough to handle situations that require our particular skill set. Not enough to handle what we're facing now." Patricia led Sarah to a conference table, where additional intelligence materials were spread out like pieces of a massive puzzle. Photographs, communication intercepts, tactical analyses, and operational reports created a picture of enemy activities that was both sophisticated and deeply troubling. "The rogue operative has been busy," Patricia said, pointing to a timeline that showed escalating enemy capabilities over the past 18 months. Training programs that mirrored our methods, operational planning that anticipated our responses, intelligence gathering that penetrated our most secure communications. Sarah studied the materials with growing alarm. "This isn't just someone sharing information. This is comprehensive betrayal of everything we swore to protect. And it's about to get worse. We've identified the next target, a joint operation involving NATO allies that could result in massive casualties if the enemy has advanced knowledge of tactical planning. Timeline: 72 hours, maybe less." Sarah looked around the room at faces she had trusted with her life, in situations where trust was the only thing standing between success and catastrophic failure. These were people who had chosen service over safety, duty over personal comfort, mission success over individual recognition. "What's the plan?" Patricia smiled for the first time since Sarah had arrived. "We're going to do what we've always done. We're going to identify the threat, neutralize the danger, and protect people who will never know they were in peril. And if things go wrong, then Major Sarah Mitchell returns to her promotion ceremony and her new position at the Pentagon with no knowledge of this conversation or these operations." Sarah nodded slowly. It was the same arrangement they had always operated under. Success in shadows, failure in silence, service without recognition or reward. "I have one condition," she said finally. "What's that?" "When this is over, when the threat is neutralized and American lives are safe, I want to go back to my promotion ceremony. I want to accept my new position and use it to make sure situations like this are identified and addressed before they reach crisis levels." Patricia considered this for a moment. "You want to build bridges between the official military structure and the shadow operations that protect it. I want to make sure that competent people are recognized and utilized effectively, regardless of their background or the classification level of their experience. That's ambitious. It's also necessary." Patricia extended her hand to Sarah, a gesture that carried the weight of renewed partnership and shared commitment. "Welcome back to the team that doesn't exist, Major Mitchell. Let's go save some lives." As Sarah shook Patricia's hand, she felt the familiar sensation of stepping from the known world into the shadows, where the most important work was conducted by people whose names would never appear in history books. The silver ring on her finger caught the light from the intelligence displays, its simple inscription carrying the weight of oaths that transcended official assignments and personal desires. Some commitments, Sarah realized, were deeper than career advancement or public recognition. Some ghosts never rested because the world needed guardians who were willing to sacrifice everything, including their own identities, to protect people who would never know their names or understand their sacrifices. Major Sarah Mitchell, Director-Designate of Tactical Innovation, had found her way home to the place where she had always belonged, in service to something larger than herself, in partnership with people who shared her commitment to duty above all else. In a world where threats evolved constantly and enemies adapted quickly, there would always be a need for soldiers who could operate in the spaces between official policy and operational necessity, protecting the innocent by embracing the shadows that others feared to enter. Sarah stood at the window of the command center, looking out at the darkness that concealed so much of what kept the world safe. Behind her, Patricia and the other operatives continued their planning, their voices a familiar backdrop of tactical discussions and strategic analysis. The sounds reminded her of 100 other nights in 100 other locations, where small groups of dedicated professionals worked to prevent disasters that the public would never hear about. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who had traveled an impossible journey, from the coffee-serving Captain Mitchell, who had been dismissed and mocked, to the decorated Major Mitchell, who would soon stand before Pentagon leadership as a recognized expert in tactical innovation. But the reflection also showed something deeper. A soldier who had finally found the balance between service and recognition, between capability and acknowledgement. The past 6 months had taught her that respect earned through demonstrated competence was more valuable than respect demanded through rank or authority. The officers who had once mocked her now sought her guidance, not because they feared her classified background, but because they had witnessed her expertise firsthand. That transformation, from dismissal to recognition based on merit rather than mythology, represented something profound about the nature of true leadership. But tonight's call back to the shadows reminded her that some forms of service could never be fully public. There would always be threats that required responses operating outside conventional channels, situations where the very existence of American capabilities needed to remain hidden to preserve their effectiveness. The tension between her public role and her shadow missions wasn't a contradiction. It was a necessary duality that allowed her to serve at multiple levels simultaneously. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Emma Walsh. "Good luck with your promotion ceremony next week. You've inspired more people than you'll ever know." The message was followed by another from General Morrison. "The Pentagon won't be the same without your regular presence, but I understand some duties call louder than others." Sarah smiled softly. Even in the classified world of shadow operations, the relationships she had built during her time in the light continued to matter. Emma would continue her journey toward Special Forces qualification, carrying forward lessons about persistence and capability that would serve her throughout her career. Morrison would implement the policy changes they had discussed, ensuring that future Sarah Mitchells would be recognized for their abilities rather than dismissed for their appearances. The coffee-serving woman, who had been shoved aside in Pentagon hallways, had become a bridge between two worlds: the official military structure that operated in public view and the shadow operations that protected national security from positions of anonymity. Her unique journey, from invisibility to recognition to voluntary return to shadows, created possibilities that hadn't existed before. Patricia approached the window, carrying a tactical vest that Sarah recognized as her old field gear. "It's time," she said simply. Sarah took the vest, feeling its familiar weight settle across her shoulders. The equipment was updated with new technology, but the basic design remained unchanged. Tools for someone who needed to be prepared for any situation while maintaining the ability to blend into any environment. "Any regrets?" Patricia asked quietly. Sarah considered the question seriously. She was walking away from a promotion ceremony where she would be recognized for achievements that represented years of struggle and perseverance. She was postponing a position that would allow her to influence military policy at the highest levels. She was choosing uncertainty and danger over security and recognition. "No regrets," she said finally. "Some callings are stronger than careers." The command center's communication system crackled with updates from field operatives around the world. Intelligence reports flowed in from sources that existed only in encrypted databases. Tactical assessments arrived from analysts whose names appeared on no official rosters. It was a reminder that the work they did connected to a global network of dedicated professionals who had chosen service over personal advancement. The promotion ceremony could wait. The recognition would come eventually. But tonight, there were lives to save and threats to neutralize, and Major Sarah Mitchell had work to do. From the story of Sarah Mitchell, a woman dismissed as a mere coffee server only to reveal her extraordinary past as a Delta Force operative, we learn a profound life lesson. Never judge someone's worth by their outward appearance or assigned role. Sarah, mocked and underestimated in the Pentagon's halls, carried the weight of classified missions and unmatched expertise beneath her unassuming exterior. Her journey, from enduring scorn to saving lives with unparalleled skill, teaches us that true strength lies in resilience, competence, and the courage to rise above prejudice. This resonates deeply because we all face moments where society's biases or snap judgments try to define us. Sarah's story reminds us that our value isn't determined by others' perceptions, but by our actions and the impact we choose to make, even in the face of adversity. Her ability to remain composed, leveraging her hidden expertise to avert disaster, inspires us to recognize the potential in ourselves and others, regardless of how the world may label us. It's a call to look beyond titles, appearances, or stereotypes, and to honor the unseen heroes among us, those who quietly carry the weight of sacrifice for the greater good. If Sarah's story stirred something in you, whether it's admiration for her resilience or a reflection on your own experiences of being underestimated, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories matter, and we'd love to hear how this lesson resonates with you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to join our community and stay inspired by more powerful tales of courage and redemption. Your support helps us bring these stories to life. Be a part of it today.